When I grow up, I will marry you.
The girl froze. Not blinked, not smiled, froze. Her small fingers tightened over the silk of her dress, and those wide, startled eyes flew up to the ragged little boy standing in front of her, as if the world had suddenly tilted off its axis. And then her father laughed, not because it was funny, because sometimes powerful men laugh when they are too offended to speak. The sound cracked through the room, sharp, disbelieving, ugly. He leaned back in his gold-trimmed chair, staring at the maid's son as though something impossible had just happened in his house. His smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. Only insult, only disbelief, only the dangerous amusement of a man who could ruin lives with a sentence. Behind the sofa, the maid went white. Her hand flew to her mouth so fast it was as if her body understood the danger before her mind could name it. Her other hand trembled against her chest. Her eyes locked on her son, and in that instant, her whole body seemed to understand what the children did not. Something terrible had just happened. The girl still had not moved. Then her father's laughter stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. He rose slowly. His expression changed by the second, amusement draining into outrage, outrage sharpening into something colder, meaner, more dangerous. The room seemed to hold its breath as he stepped forward and pointed at the boy like he was pointing at a crime. "A maid's son," he said, voice low and deadly, "just promised to marry my daughter in my house." The boy did not step back. The mother's knees nearly gave out. The girl finally found her voice. But before she could speak, her father turned toward the maid with a look so merciless it made the air itself feel thinner. And that was the moment everyone in the room understood the same thing at once. One innocent sentence had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. To everyone in that room, it sounded like madness. But to the boy, it was never about money. It was never about the mansion, the chandeliers, the polished floors, or the surname people whispered with fear. To him, it was a promise born from the first time he saw the billionaire's daughter hurt and realized no one in her world was protecting her. His name was Daniel. He was 10 years old, the son of Rosa, one of the live-in maids at the Ashford estate. Rosa was the kind of woman whose exhaustion lived deep in her bones. She woke before sunrise, worked until long after dark, and still somehow found the strength to wash her son's face, straighten his collar, and whisper the same warning every morning: "Keep your head down. Rich people don't forgive what they consider disrespect." Daniel did not fully understand that yet. He understood hunger. He understood tired feet. He understood that his mother came home with aching hands. But the cruel mathematics of class, the invisible rule that some children could make mistakes while others paid for them with everything, he was still learning. And he learned it because of her. Her name was Elena Ashford, the billionaire's daughter. But Daniel did not first know her as the girl from the grand portraits or the expensive cars. He knew her first as the girl behind the garden wall, trying not to cry. He had gone to deliver folded napkins to the outdoor tea table when he heard the sound. Small, choked, hidden, the kind of crying done by someone who had already learned that being seen in pain only made things worse. He looked around the hedges and found her in the shade, sitting on a stone bench with her shoulders folded inward like she was trying to disappear inside herself. There was dirt on her shoes, a tear on the cuff of her uniform, and in her lap, a sketchbook with one page ripped nearly in half. Daniel stopped. He had never spoken to her before, not really. Children from upstairs and children from downstairs did not belong in the same story. But pain ignores class. "What happened?" he asked. She looked up too fast, embarrassed. "Nothing." He frowned. "That doesn't look like nothing." Her lips trembled once before she forced them still. Then she held up the torn page. It had been a drawing of her mother. Someone had scribbled across the face in dark ink, "Dead mothers don't come back." Daniel stared so hard his chest began to hurt. "Who did that?" "Girls from school," she whispered. "They said I think I'm better than them. They took my sketchbook and passed it around." "Did the teacher stop them?" She gave a broken little laugh. "Teachers don't like trouble when my father funds the new library." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He had spent years thinking rich people had everything. But sitting there beside that girl, he saw something stranger, something sadder. She had everything except the one thing a child actually needs when the world turns cruel. Someone to protect her. He sat beside her without asking. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then he asked, "Was it your mother?" She nodded. "Do you remember her?" "Only pieces," Elena said. "Her voice, her perfume, the way she used to touch my hair when I couldn't sleep." Daniel swallowed. That's still remembering. She looked at him then, really looked at him, like no one had answered her that gently in a very long time. That was how it started. Not with romance, not with wonder, with recognition. He began noticing her after that, noticing that she returned from school quieter than she left, noticing that she always seemed to pause outside the front doors before going in, as if gathering strength, noticing that the biggest house in the city could somehow still feel empty around one little girl. Her father, Victor Ashford, was the kind of man newspapers loved, ruthless in business, generous in public, photographed at hospitals and charity galas, praised as visionary, admired as untouchable. But inside his own home, he was a man constantly in motion, always on a call, always signing something, always saying later. Later became the language Elena grew up on. Later, sweetheart. Later, darling. We'll talk later. Later never came. Daniel saw things he was probably never meant to see. He saw Elena dressed for her birthday dinner, waiting at the table while the candles burned shorter and shorter because her father's meeting ran long. He saw her standing at the top of the staircase during a charity gala, smiling for guests who called her lucky, while she searched the crowd for a father who was talking to investors instead of looking at her. He saw her in the library one night, asleep in a chair with a blanket half fallen to the floor because she had waited for someone to come tell her good night. No one had. Rosa saw it too. One evening, while mending Daniel's shirt under weak kitchen light, she said softly, "That girl is lonelier than we are." Daniel looked up. How can someone in a house like this be lonely? His mother's eyes darkened, because loneliness doesn't care how expensive the walls are. The friendship built itself in small, secret places. A mango stolen from the kitchen and split in half behind the greenhouse. A paper bird folded out of an old receipt. A shared bench under a jacaranda tree where neither of them had to pretend to be okay. Elena liked that Daniel never acted impressed by her last name. Daniel liked that Elena never acted ashamed of his. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they did not. Sometimes she told him about school, about girls who smiled in front of teachers and cut her open in private, about boys who only spoke to her because their parents wanted access, about how exhausting it was to wonder every day whether anyone liked her for herself. Other times she said nothing at all, and Daniel just sat beside her until the storm inside her quieted. And somewhere in those afternoons, something fierce and innocent took root inside him, the need to be the one person who never looked away when she hurt. One day she came to the jacaranda tree with a bruise hidden under powder. Daniel noticed it anyway. "Who did that?" "It doesn't matter. It matters if it happened to you." She laughed weakly. "You always say things like that." "Because they're true." Her smile faded. She sat down and picked at the bark of the bench. "Sometimes I think people hate me for things I never did. They hate my father. They hate my house. They hate what they think I am. And somehow all of that lands on me." Daniel felt something hot and helpless move through him. Children do not have the right language for injustice. They just know when something is wrong. "You didn't do anything," he said. "That doesn't stop it." He looked at the bruise again, then at her face, then down at his hands, small and useless in his lap. But in his chest, a promise had already begun forming long before he knew how to say it. Not because he wanted to own her, not because he dreamed of becoming rich, because every time she was hurt, something inside him rose like fire. A child's instinctive, wordless devotion. "I will not let the world crush you if I can stand in front of it first." The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon. Elena arrived home soaked through, carrying herself with the stiff dignity of someone trying not to fall apart. Her hair clung to her cheeks. One sleeve was muddy. Her eyes were red, but dry in that dangerous way that means the crying is over and the damage is deeper now. Daniel ran to her. She tried to smile. It collapsed immediately. This time, the girls at school had locked her outside the bus as a prank and driven off while filming her standing in the rain. By the time she got home, humiliated and shaking, her father had been in the middle of an important meeting. He barely looked at her. "Go change," he had said. "We'll talk later." Later. Again. Elena told Daniel that in a voice so numb it frightened him. Then, for the first time since he had known her, she whispered something that made his whole body go still. "I think if I disappeared, half the people in this house wouldn't notice until morning." Daniel stared at her. He was only a boy. He had no money, no influence. influence, no power, but standing there under the dripping edge of the servants' passage, he understood something with painful clarity. Neglect can wound deeper than poverty. His mother could not buy him much, but she noticed every tear in his clothes, every change in his face, every silence in his voice. And this girl, this rich, polished, lonely girl, was starving in a house full of abundance. That night, there was a formal dinner at the mansion. Important guests, crystal glasses, polished silver, a performance of perfection. Rosa was assigned to serve. Daniel was supposed to stay out of sight. Elena was dressed like a porcelain doll and seated beside her father like a decoration he owned. Through the crack of the service door, Daniel watched. He watched guests praise Victor Ashford's legacy. He watched them compliment Elena's manners without noticing how tightly she held her hands together beneath the table. He watched her father laugh with investors while she sat silent, invisible in plain sight. And then one of the guests said, "Your daughter is fortunate. A father like you can give her anything." Elena lowered her eyes. That was when Daniel saw it, that tiny, devastating break in her expression. The flicker of hurt she had gotten so good at hiding. The fresh pain of hearing a lie repeated in front of a room full of people who would never know better. She stood and excused herself. No one followed. Not the guests. Not her father. Daniel did. He found her near the tall window, staring into the dark garden. Her shoulders were rigid, but her eyes were full. "Why did you leave?" he asked softly. She laughed without humor. "Because if I stayed any longer, I was going to cry in front of all of them." "You can cry. Not in there." He moved closer, "Then out here." That did it. Her face crumpled and the tears came fast, silent, angry. Not dramatic, not loud, just the kind that had been waiting too long. Daniel stood there watching her cry, and something inside him locked into place. It was not a fantasy. It was not childish greed. It was a vow in the only language he had. If growing up meant becoming a man, then one day he would become the kind who never let her stand alone in pain again. He took her hand, led her back toward the room, and in front of the father who kept failing her, in front of the guests who admired the wrong things, in front of his terrified mother whose whole life depended on silence, he said it. "When I grow up, I'm going to marry you." The girl froze. The way her father laughed made Rosa go cold. Not a laugh of joy, a laugh of offense, of arrogance, of a man who heard not innocence but insult. Victor Ashford leaned back slowly, eyes glittering with disbelief, then rose from his chair with a smile so sharp it made the entire room feel smaller. "You," he said, looking Daniel up and down with cruel amusement, "you will marry my daughter." Daniel did not let go of Elena's hand. "Yes." A guest coughed into his glass. Another looked away. Rosa's hand shook at her chest as she struggled to remain standing. "Daniel," she whispered, but fear had already stolen her voice. Victor's laughter vanished. He took one step forward, then another. By the time he stopped, his face had changed completely. "This is what happens," he said, turning his fury on Rosa now, "when servants forget to teach their children where they belong." Rosa went pale. "Sir, please. He's only a child." "Exactly. Which means this insolence was allowed to grow." Elena finally found her voice. "Father, stop." He did not even look at her. Daniel felt her hand shaking in his, but he also felt her trying not to let go. That gave him more courage than he should have had. "I said it because no one protects her," he burst out. The room died. Victor turned so slowly it was terrifying. "What did you say?" Daniel's heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears. But now that the truth was out, he could not stop. "She gets hurt and everyone acts like it doesn't matter. People make her cry and nobody helps her. You're always here for everyone else except her." Rosa closed her eyes in horror. Elena stared at him in shock. Victor Ashford looked as if he had just been struck in front of the entire world. There are some truths powerful people can ignore in private, but spoken aloud by a poor child in a room full of witnesses, those truths become unbearable. "Get them out," Victor said. Elena stepped forward instantly. "No." He looked at her at last. "You will not speak to me in that tone." "Then what tone should I use?" she said, voice shaking. "The one I use when I pretend not to notice you always choose your meetings over me." That stunned him, not because she had never felt it, because she had never said it. Rosa was crying now, quietly, helplessly, her whole body braced for the collapse of everything. Daniel stood perfectly still beside Elena. Victor looked from his daughter, to the maid, to the boy, and for one long, unbearable moment, the room waited to see which mattered more to him, his pride or the truth. He chose pride first. By morning, Rosa and Daniel were dismissed. No dramatic goodbye, no second chance, no mercy, just an envelope, final wages, and instructions to leave through the back gate. Rosa packed in silence, her movements too calm in the way grief sometimes is when it is too deep for tears. Daniel wanted to apologize, but the words felt useless. He had tried to protect someone, and instead shattered the only stability his mother had. Before they left, he ran once to the jacaranda tree. Alina was already there. She looked like she had not slept. Neither of them knew what to say at first. Then she took a folded ribbon from her wrist, the pale blue one she wore when she needed courage, and placed it in his hand. "You shouldn't have said it in there," she whispered. "I know, but no one has ever said something like that for me before." He looked at her, throat burning. "I meant it." She nodded slowly. "I know." That was their goodbye. No kiss, no grand embrace, just two children standing under a tree, understanding that one reckless truth had changed both of their lives. Years passed. Daniel grew up in a neighborhood where rent was paid late and dreams had to be stronger than circumstance. He studied hard, worked harder, and carried his mother's sacrifice like a second heartbeat. But he never forgot why he had made that promise. Not to climb into another world, to become someone no frightened child would ever have to wait for in vain. He became a lawyer, not the polished kind who protected the wealthy from consequences. The other kind, the kind who stood with workers cheated by employers, with mothers evicted without warning, with children pushed aside by systems too proud to notice them. Rosa used to watch him leave for work and smile through tears. "You kept your heart," she would say. "That is harder than becoming successful." Alina's life changed too, but not all at once. Victor Ashford never forgot that night, though pride kept him from admitting why. At first, he blamed the maid's son for the humiliation, but the words Daniel had spoken in that room stayed with him like a splinter under skin. No one protects her. He began seeing things he had trained himself not to see. The pauses before Alina entered a room, the practiced smile, the way she stopped expecting him, and slowly, clumsily, far too late, he started trying. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to understand what his neglect had cost. By the time Alina was 24, she had become something stronger than the lonely child Daniel remembered. Graceful, intelligent, emotionally careful. The kind of woman who could walk through a room full of wealth without mistaking admiration for love. Then fate brought them back together at a legal foundation gala. In the same mansion, Daniel arrived in a dark suit, calm and self-possessed, carrying none of the shame the house had once tried to place on him. People turned when he spoke. They listened, not because of a surname, because of substance. Alina saw him across the ballroom and knew him instantly, not by his face first, by the way he looked at the room without bowing to it. Later, they met in the garden, near the jacaranda tree. For a moment they simply stood there, both smiling like people staring at a ghost they had hoped for. "You came back," she said. "You're still here," he answered. That made her laugh softly. Then the silence between them changed. Not awkward, full, like years folding inward. She touched the old ribbon now tied around her wrist again. "I kept it." He looked at it and almost lost his breath. If you're still watching and you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect moment to do that. Victor Ashford found them in the garden. Daniel straightened automatically. Alina went still, but Victor did not come with the old fury in his face. He came with something heavier. Age had not made him softer. Life had made him more honest. For a long moment, he looked at Daniel as if seeing not the maid's son from years ago, but the man standing in front of him now. Then he said quietly, "You were right." Daniel did not answer. Victor's eyes moved to Alina, and I was too proud to hear it when it mattered most. Alina's breath caught. That might have been the first true apology he had ever given her. Not polished, not public, not hidden inside a gift. Just truth. He turned back to Daniel. "When you spoke that night, I heard disrespect. What terrified me was something else." His voice lowered. "That a child with nothing could see my daughter more clearly than I could." Daniel held his gaze. "I never wanted her because of what she had. I know that now." Victor nodded once, like the motion cost him something enormous. Then, to the astonishment of both of them, he stepped aside. "I won't decide her heart again." And he walked away. Alina stood in silence, tears bright in her eyes. Daniel laughed once under his breath, almost in disbelief. "Your father has shocked everyone twice in the same house." She smiled, "Including me." He stepped closer. "When I was a boy," he said, "I thought marrying you meant saving you. I know better now." Her eyes searched his. "It means choosing you without trying to own you, standing beside you without silencing you, protecting your dignity, not controlling your life." He drew a slow breath. "I can't promise a painless world. I can only promise I will never treat your heart carelessly." Alina's tears slipped free. This time she did not hide them. Daniel reached into his pocket and took out a ring. Simple, elegant, earned. No performance, no audience, no transaction. Just love that had survived innocence, exile, time, and truth. "When I grow up," he said softly, with a smile that broke and healed something in both of them at once, "I still want to marry you." She laughed through tears, and then she said the word that made every wound, every year, every impossible distance feel like it had led somewhere worthy. Yes, not because he had become successful, not because her father finally changed, not because fairy tales belong only to the rich, but because from the very beginning, when she was humiliated, neglected, and emotionally abandoned, he had offered her the rarest thing in the world. Not status, not rescue, not possession, but faithful love. And maybe that is the lesson this story leaves behind. Class prejudice can blind people. Pride can destroy what should have been protected. And emotional neglect can wound deeper than poverty ever will. But true love does not begin with money. Sometimes it begins the first time one wounded heart says to another, "I see your pain, and I won't leave you alone in it." So tell me, do you think a single careless reaction from a parent can change the course of a child's life forever? If this story moved you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this.